Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, Alan Bishop, the show where I try to give you the best possible distilling information that I possibly can based on my experiences in both the legal distilling industry and the home distilling hobby. So, working around the farm here today, the homestead. Little girl's over here playing in the pool and just trying to clean up the yard a little bit. We had 2 days worth of rain finally. Things were getting pretty dry before that and pretty desperate as far as the few crops that we got in the ground this year. And more than happy to get that rain and very thankful for it. Prayers answered there. So just tune in today to follow up on a couple different questions and do a couple different videos. No hat. I do realize that I do not have a forehead. I have an 8 head. You could land a fucking plane on my forehead legitimately. And the hair just keeps moving backwards, guys. Anyways, here is a question/statement from Redneck Ramblings. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out at Bishop's Homegrown or any of my social media, Facebook, Instagram, etc., or in the YouTube comments, and I will do the best that I can possibly to answer whatever distillation-related questions that you have. So, moving on to the Redneck Ramblings email. Alan, I found your video on yeast to be very interesting. I'm extremely glad to hear that. Could you go into more detail on the yeast log? I have never heard of that before, but I have not done a lot of research into the old ways of making moonshine. Are you planning another video on yeast? So I'll preface this with saying that the yeast log, the Norwegian magic yeast log, yeast ring, there's various different names and different methods of propagating yeast on wood. It's not really related to moonshine. It was related to traditional ale brewing, or gruit brewing as it were called. It was an old school, extremely old school way of propagating yeast. I don't know of any traditional moonshiners that used it. I just thought it was a really cool way to propagate yeast, and it worked well for me, so I thought I would share it with you guys, right? Because just because something is related to a different alcoholic art doesn't mean that it's not applicable to the art of distillation. Or just because you're distilling a bourbon doesn't mean that you can't learn things from cognac, or you can't learn things from tequila, or you can't learn things from rum, etc., right? All those arts are interchangeable to some degree, and we should learn everything we can from all those arts and apply them to our own art. Keep the things that make sense to us and get rid of the things that don't make sense to us, right? I don't expect that anybody watching this will use exclusively my methods, which I've come to call the Black Forest method, which is a combination of old pre-prohibition Black Forest actual distillation methods, and post-prohibition Alan is a distiller in the Black Forest, and these are the things that work for him. So obviously everyone has to find their own road, they have to take their own route, they have to find their own methods, and then that's how they find their voice in the art of distilling. Much like music, you might start off, if you play music, you might start off loving Hank Williams, but you probably won't sound like Hank Williams. You may go the exact opposite direction, because even though that's what you love to listen to, that's not necessarily what's in your soul to play. So that being said, one of the other questions I get asked a lot that will tie into this is books about distilling, or books that people can purchase about distilling, read about distilling, infer some more things about distilling, and really help further educate themselves. Things that you're not going to learn going to, say, Moonshine University, or going through the International Brewers and Distillers courses, or any of those sort of things, right? Nothing against any of those places, but there is far more information out there, and for me, far more interesting and relevant information for what I do, both as a craft distiller and a hobby or home distiller, than what you're going to get from any of those institutions. Just a second, guys. You guys stay there, honey. Okay? I'm recording a video, okay? It'll be okay. Just give me about a couple minutes and you can come up here, okay? So one of the books that I very highly recommend, actually the book that I recommend really almost more than any other book, and I'll cover a couple other books on this show in time as well. But the book that I really highly recommend for the brewing arts, especially if you consider distillation and brewing and winemaking sort of spiritual enterprises, this book is absolutely indispensable. It's an older book. It was written in 1997. It's still absolutely relevant. It really touches on the spiritualism and the healing power of alcohol in particular, if you choose to look at alcohol that way. But this also will cover some of those yeast things that we've talked about, as far as like the Norse magic log and Kveik yeast and those sort of things. This book will also touch on a lot of those spiritual matters alongside alcohol being a key to open other doors. So the book is Sacred and Herbal Healing Beers. This is it right here. I think you can get it on Amazon. And it was written by Stephen Herod Buhner. I hope I'm saying that right. Buhner, author of Sacred Plant Medicine. And this thing is full of recipes of all types. It's full of stories, about the way the different cultures looked at alcohol, how they considered it a spiritual thing, how fermentation played out, whether or not they they celebrated whenever they were fermenting something to try to encourage the quote-unquote bogeyman to make the alcohol, or whether they sat in quiet reverence as the fermentation happened. Those were all spiritual practices. And even though that may seem a little, as some people call it, woo, there's a lot of relevant stuff in here for the production of alcohol on a practical level, right? And even though this is based on beers and wines and meads and things of that nature, all of those alcoholic concoctions, all of those brews can be distilled, and I would argue should be distilled, even if there is no historical reference for distilling those particular products. There's no reason not to. One of my favorite projects I've ever worked on was the Stone Beer Groot that myself and my brother DJ Henderson did. We also are working on a documentary for that we pulled off with Bill Hockett and Caleb McCawkey up at Sugar Creek Malt. That stone beer distilled extremely well, and a few people were lucky enough to get a couple bottles of that and taste it. I think they would all agree with you. Of all the things I've ever made, that may be, in my opinion, short of absinthe and apple brandy, one of my favorite things I've ever done. Certainly one of the more interesting things I've ever done. So with that being said, I hope I answered your question. I apologize, my daughter's in the background playing in the pool. She's trying to come up on the porch wall going, I'm trying to finish this video without the puppy getting up here and knocking the camera down. So she'll show up on these videos eventually. She shows up on Distillers Talk and everywhere else eventually, and she knows as much about distillation as most hobbyist distillers do at this point, and she's only about to turn 7 years old. So bright future in front of her if she chooses to take that path, and she may not. But anyways, guys, reach out to me with your questions, bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, social media, and in YouTube comments. I love y'all. I'll catch up with you soon, and please go out and buy this book. I'm telling you, if you love the art of distilling, and you love the art of brewing, and you love the spirituality and the concept of it being a key to a doorway that changes perception and changes the way that you look at the world, you're going to love this book. This is one of my quote-unquote Bibles. Not to put it up there with the Bible or any other spiritual book that you may or may not believe in, but love that one. Read it many times. I'll read it many times again, and I'll keep practicing with it and doing all the things it says to do, and then running them through a still, which it doesn't say to do. Love y'all. Later.